Roll the intro.
All right, Ibrahim. First of all, it's good to meet you. My name is Saeed. We also have Paco on the show. We're both
Hey,
high school friends of Ali. I've been working with Ali for a while on this podcast. Let's just get straight into it, right?
sure.
The intro for Ibrahim Rashid. So, Ibrahim Rashid is an author. He's a Pakistani American who grew up in South Africa, England, Nigeria, and the UAE. Very Mr. Worldwide kind of concept going there. His global upbringing installed in him a passion for social justice and a desire to create a better world. After feeling disillusioned working in foreign aid, he pursued a master's in public policy. Oh, cool, bro. I can relate to that. I
Nice.
did politics, so very similar.
Yeah.
He learned finance and now works in sustainable investing. Additionally, he's building his first startup, Strong Haulers, a tech platform predicting symptoms for COVID long haulers, which shares its name with his debut book, Strong Hauler Learning to Live with Long COVID, an anthology of lessons from battling chronic illnesses. Besides his professional pursuits, he enjoys writing, traveling, and training in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Bro, I've heard some good stories about you. You seem like a great person. And I also heard one major story about what happened to you after COVID. Could you tell us what I'm referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to be back on the show. It's been a few years since I came on, and it's great to see how the show has evolved in 4 years. I remember so well, like when Ali was doing this in COVID time. He set the challenge to do like one new episode every day during the pandemic, and I couldn't tell if Ali was going stir crazy because of lockdown, and or if he was onto something brilliant. And I guess 4 years later, well, you guys can decide whether he's a brilliant mastermind or if he's crazy for doing this for so long. So it's great to be back 4 years later on the show. So let me talk to you a bit. So for me, I was 23 when I got COVID-19, like many of us in the pandemic in November of 2020. And despite having pre-existing conditions, being an athlete, doing my annual checkup every year, I didn't recover after that first infection. I developed heart issues. My heart stopped beating properly. I had
Mm,
lung issues. I had difficulty breathing. I dealt with pervasive fatigue and body aches, and most challengingly, I suddenly found myself unable to walk, where I was reading a book underneath a tree during exam time, and I found myself just unable to get up. And so I had to crawl home, and for the next year or so, did a lot of intensive rehab where I had to use a cane, had to use a cane just to get around. So I dealt with mobility challenges that all stemmed after my COVID infection. It's an open question whether this all happened because of the COVID infection or whether this happened because of the vaccine. Some people deal with things like this post vaccine, but it's an uncomfortable topic for those of us in the public square to acknowledge, but it's sort of getting more recognition now. So
yeah.
yeah, after COVID in my early 20s, I just like dealt with like these like very intense situations. And so the book that I wrote, Strong Hauler, Learning to Live with Long COVID, which besides me, really is divided into three sections that I think details the journey of finding out that you have a chronic illness, your body doesn't work in your early 20s. The first half, the first third of the book is what I called the resilience chapters, where I
Yeah.
reflect on a year of illness. Like what does it mean to get sick in your early 20s? I always argued that the challenge of getting sick, it was less so like the challenges were less about the symptoms and being unable to walk and the physical pain of illness. It was more about, I think, the biggest problems were like, what did it rob you of in like the social world, right? Like, how does it affect your personal relationships, your romantic relationships, your
Hmm.
sense of self and your professional vocation, where you live, where you can live. So the first third of the book, the resilience chapters, are my reflections on like the lessons learned of how did I, what does it mean to cope with and live with a chronic illness. The next section is what I call the relapse chapter. That follows like a 3 week period in April of 2022, where despite making gains and learning how to walk again and improving my condition, I found myself suddenly sick. I was in a relationship, and when that relationship ended, it triggered what's called my relapse, where my symptoms
Hmm.
and the emotional stress, I got like very sick in ways that I never experienced before. And over those 2 to 3 weeks, like I was losing my ability to speak. I couldn't see color. Like I was like being really fatigued and I couldn't walk and I thought I was dying. And so I ended up checking myself into the emergency room. And so the relapse chapters are the day-to-day reflections. They're kind of like my
Yeah.
journal entry, the hour by hour play of like watching myself get sick. And at the time, writing was the coping mechanism to like make sense of like all this like sensory loss and like illness.
Hmm.
And so I didn't die. I'm still here. I go to the hospital and I come out and it's like, oh, I
Thankfully,
survived,
yeah.
And then the final chapter is the recovery chapter, which is kind of like the 6 month period after that journey, after that hospitalization, where it's kind of like making sense of like, oh wow, like I had a year of illness. I thought I was getting better, and then I fell, and all of like my like skills were really tested. How do I pick myself back up again? And it's like the
Yeah.
6 months of like trying out new treatments, going to new doctors, coming to a place of acceptance that like the body is malleable and like we're never either healthy nor sick. We're always oscillating in between the two and just coming to that place of acceptance, and just trying getting to a point where over those 6 months, I made even bigger gains. The recovery chapters actually ends. One of the last sections is of me and Ali, our great host here, where every time I hang out with him in California, what I love about Ali as a friend is he's one of the most positive and encouraging people I've ever met in my life. He's a real good role model, and sometimes this comes off as him being a dick, where he's always like pushing me to do things that I don't want to do. But other times it's really important and really helpful. Where he was like, Ibrahim, you're in California. I haven't seen you in years. Let's go fucking like hike a mountain. And I'm like, bro, I was literally sick. Like, what do you mean go hike a mountain? And he was like, doctors are like working with you. If they said you couldn't hike a mountain, they would have told you. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. But he was like, no, let's go hike. And so I forget we went to the wisdom tree, in LA, and it was a wonderful time, me and him. And so one of the very last chapters of the book is like talking about that experience of like hiking up that mountain with Ali after like 6 months of illness. Like, what did it feel like to be like, oh wait, I have my body back, and just like feeling of that personal accomplishment. And so, yeah, I think if I were to cap out, if I were to like summarize like the journey and like, what the book is about, what I went through, it's the story of, I think, I'm 27 today, so it's been 4 years since like this all happened. It was what I went through during the pandemic, how it hit me very deeply on the physical and emotional side. I got really sick. I thought I was getting better, and then I got worse. And then it's kind of the journey of trying to come to peace with, making your rehabilitative gains over time, and then also just like reflections on like what does it mean to both live with and then survive and then thrive after chronic illness.
Mm. Wow. I'm just trying to absorb all of it. This is like,
Mic
that's quite a
drop.
Yeah.
story, man. Yeah.
I mean,
Predator
I would have done
drone.
drugs. I would have smoked weed or something. Like you decided, yeah, like to be honest, like
Okay.
you decided
Okay.
the whole. I was like,
Paco,
yo, bro,
Paco, we wanna,
I
we
would have just.
wanna.
It made no sense. No offense.
You're
Like I
saying
would be
that
like,
as if I did it, and it's not a.
no, I mean that's great.
Okay,
You
Paco,
went
I
through a
think we want to
whole.
promote healthy coping mechanisms, please, if
Yeah,
that's
it
okay.
is. I mean,
What do you
yeah,
think
I'm
we
not
did at the
against.
top of the wisdom? What do you think Ali and I
Yeah,
did at the top of the wisdom
We did
tree?
not do it. We
hey,
just did a hike, bro. That's all we did.
hey.
I
I
say we
mean,
got really high up the mountain.
We did get high up the mountain. That is true.
yeah, that's great. I mean,
I'm, you can interpret it in ways.
you guys went up to a mountain to get high. I just want to done it in my
So,
room.
Ibrahim, I want to. You mentioned there's a bit of a delay on Paco, so we'll have to work around that.
Like I said,
But, Ibrahim, I want to understand a
I
bit
don't
more
speak
about
English
the.
well, so we either got high up the mountain or high on the mountain. Like, depends on how you
Hey,
want to
We
man.
move
translate
on.
that
We
from
move.
Urdu to English. We don't speak Americano.
But Ibrahim, I want to know more about the coping mechanisms that you learned, that the healthy ones that you use on your day-to-day basis. Maybe like I'm guessing they became part of your routine or your lifestyle, and what kind of habits that you built for yourself.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll say, right? So like 3, 4 years ago when and I 3, 4 years ago when I got sick, right, from long
Yeah.
COVID is what we call it, right, colloquially. Long COVID, just to like I think ground us in the terminology. Long COVID is what you call like it's a post-viral illness, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
post-viral effect from the coronavirus. Every virus in human history has had people who got that initial virus and never recovered. When you think
Yeah.
about like HIV and AIDS, right? Like that's like people get the AIDS virus and then they develop the long-term effects of it, the HIV and AIDS, right? When you think of
Yeah.
HPV, right, which is like that's like a STD that women can get, right? Like that develops into like cancer, right? Even the flu, right? There are people who get the flu and then never recover, even from like the Spanish flu of the early like 1920s, right? People didn't recover from those after. So like when we think about the history of viruses, there have always been a sliver of the population that doesn't recover from it in those early
Mm.
days, in those early years, and so COVID-19 is no different. I think what
Mhm.
makes COVID-19 different was just it was a pandemic at a global scale where the world
Yeah.
is more connected than ever before. Like the last pandemic was 100 years ago, but we didn't have this connectivity the way like we do today. Like Spanish flu was very much isolated in Europe, didn't really like go really global, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's just like you see the post-viral effects just play out at a much larger global scale. Some people call it the largest mass disabling event in history. And so long COVID represents around 200 different distinct symptoms. The most common of those can include pervasive fatigue that when you physically, mentally, or emotionally exert yourself, you then
Mm-hmm.
get like intense fatigue that puts you in bed for weeks, right? You have breathing issues, you have difficulty with what's called brain fog. So it's kind of like when you have that feeling of trying to recall something, but you can't recall it, but it's at the tip of your tongue. That issue of brain fog, people deal with it like all the time, right? And so those are just some of the common symptoms. Currently, there are no treatments, pharmacological treatments available for long COVID, right?
Yeah.
There's no drugs out there on the market. It's a problem that many of us who are like advocates in the space are thinking through how do you accelerate treatments for it. But at the moment, the only ways, there are no pharmacological ways to address it. So there's a lot of what you call like lifestyle management, So how do you like manage the symptoms? Through therapy, through mindfulness, through supplements, through nutrition, through
Mm-hmm.
sleep, that kind of stuff, as well as some more like over the counter medications that are more like treating symptom as opposed to like treating the illness, right?
Yeah.
So just like understanding that like there is a wide spectrum of approaches that people can take to address long COVID from the symptoms
Yeah.
side. And what helps one person doesn't necessarily help another, right? Like there's a lot of also, so each person's journey is different. So what I'll say for me, understanding that like, when I got sick, there really were no treatments available. I would say that like a few things that really helped a lot for me. The first that I'll say was I really had to like change my mindset around
Yeah.
like myself and my body. Right, what I noticed very quickly was that there is suffering and then there's despair, right? Or there is pain and then there's suffering, right? Pain is what you feel. Suffering is when you dwell on it, right? And suffering can take the size of gas in a room where it can get really big and it can get really small, right? And so the pain of a symptom, if you can't walk, that's pain. That's a physiological thing, right? But if you dwell on that pain for like weeks on end, right, it's just going to manifest and grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to make that initial pain bigger as well, right? So I would notice that mentally how my mental state really affected my symptoms. That doesn't mean that my symptoms were caused by my mental state. My mental state definitely affected the symptoms by like allowing the suffering
Yeah.
to emphasize. And so I one of the things that I really had to do was come to a place, do a lot of like acceptance and commitment therapy and cognitive
Mm.
behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
trying
Yeah.
to I think cope with the illness, find pride in like my own self, and like have more of a growth mindset. Some of the things there was like, I had to, some of the things I had to say to myself, I had to get really good at like meditating, and like if I were to like observe that like I feel a symptom and I'd get angry at myself, I'd have to be like, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so angry," I'd have to be like, "Oh, I'm having a thought that I'm angry,"
Right.
right?
You have
And
to
having
change that self-talk that you're having with yourself. Instead of saying, I'm a victim, I'm going to fail, there's nothing I can do in my life, you have to say, no, I just have, this weakness. Everyone has weaknesses.
right,
All of us have weaknesses and strengths, but no one's perfect. Life isn't fair. We have to do the best with the hand we're dealt. You have to
absolutely,
do that all the time. And I know how challenging it is. I mean, especially when it's something thrown upon you, especially when it's your physical health and you are very athletic, Ibrahim. It's so, like, for you to be so athletic and to be a skateboarder and to do jujitsu or to do, all the kinds of things you're into doing and then not being able to walk, man, I
Yeah,
can't
I can relate to
imagine.
him.
How do you relate, Paco? What do you think?
I have a mess. So yeah.
Uh-huh. So how does
I
that
got.
feel?
I mean, it's long story short, it's a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's. I
so
can't
how are
even.
you
Yeah, I
coping with
just
it,
have.
Paco?
I'm personally, I don't like talking about it. I really don't express myself to that, but
I didn't quite catch that, to be honest. Um,
yeah. I mean, I agree with what you were saying, Ali, about like it's all about like the mindset. Mindset control helps so much. Like suffering again can take the size of gas, where you can like look at it really big or you can make it really small. And so I think
yeah. Oh, I'm
finding a way
sorry,
to
I
cope with
got
it.
kicked out.
That I
I
Welcome
couldn't
back,
hear what you
Paco.
said,
yeah,
Brahim.
welcome back, Paco.
Yeah, I got kicked out.
No worries. We were
No.
just, we were talking about like how much we admire your haircut. Like all of us have like douchey like Arab like South Asian hairs where we look like potatoes, where we like shave the
Yo, so
sides, right? But then we grow
Brahim,
the top really long, just like Saeed. But like for you, you've got like, the most like, authentic one of us all. Like we're not going to
He
the
has the
same
most
Malik
wisdom.
Macklemore.
He definitely has the most wisdom in his head.
so Brahim, are you from Islamabad or Peshawar
I'm
or
from
Pakistan?
Karachi.
Ah, Karachi. Ah, yeah, but
Squad bring the biryani.
ah,
They're gonna think I'm Pakistani. Squad bring the biryani.
yeah, no, I just have a lot of Pakistani friends. Yeah, they're all get high with me, so yeah, fuck that. I mean, they're good guys, but
Hey man,
they're
I'm all
good
for it.
guys. I mean,
Get high up a hill, right? That's what we were,
no,
we were
Yeah,
sticking
when
to.
we translate
they're the
Urdu
kind
to
of guys that
English,
will
get
send
high
you to
on
jail
the
and say,
they
"Why'd you go to
climb
jail?"
Bro, what is it about medical anxiety? I feel like getting, I'm like, scared. Not like I'm just scared to get sick. I'm scared to lose my body. I'm scared of injuring myself. So, I want to be long. I want to live long and have a healthy body for my whole life and never suffer.
What's the point of life then if you're not going to suffer in it at all? Like, what's the point of just staying the same for all
I
of your
love
life?
myself, bro. I'm so happy the way I am right now.
But
Okay,
isn't
you're
that
coming off as a
boring?
bit narcissistic right now, Ali. You gotta tone it down a bit. Just turn it down a notch if you don't mind. I'm getting the dick reference that Ibrahim was saying in the beginning. I get it. Yes.
No, this is about acceptance
Uh,
commitment therapy, thinking that I'm pretty good. Of course I'm flawed and I have many flaws. But
yeah.
yeah, I just
So,
wanna be able to live a healthy life forever, man. And so
well, yeah, of course.
I don't know what it would be like for me to not be able to walk.
Well, let's hope you never have to experience that, Ali. But at the same
Like, God
time,
forbid that ever
don't
happens,
you
bro.
think for like yeah, exactly.
I mean, here's
Like,
a serious question for you guys. Like,
yeah.
Ali was like, "Oh, like, can we really enjoy life without suffering?" Like, guys, like in
No.
the afterlife, we're supposed to like live for infinity, where everything is good. Like, what are we supposed to do in the afterlife if everything is good forever? Like,
Oh,
Hmm.
ooh, that's a tough one, bro.
Paco?
Bro, that's why.
like, what am I supposed to
I'm
do
gonna tell you
forever if
guys.
everything's
Remember
always
when I
good
said
all
about
the
go
time?
karting?
And you're stuck there. Like you can't come back or like leave or just like it's
I don't
like
think you want to
I
come
don't.
back.
Suicide's not even
The
an
fuck?
option, bro.
That's why you should do it there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, bro, that's why I said this is. That's why go karting gambling. Look, I don't.
That's why
Yeah,
go kart and gamble. What are you saying?
yeah.
Guys, I want you to know that ever since I recovered from like my chronic illness, right? Like I'm all for go karting and gambling, guys. Like
Let's
Yeah,
go.
every time I did it was like riding motorcycles around like volcanoes in
I'm just
Costa Rica.
saying.
Guys, like let's party. It's like I'm alive. Like normally you'd be like, oh, like you recover. Like health is wealth. Health is everything. And I'm like, nah, man. I got my body back. Like let's like push it to the limit.
Yeah, like that's why.
Yeah,
Like
Yeah.
those sound like good coping mechanisms, I guess. Yeah, why not?
that's why I recommend cocaine. Cocaine is not haram,
Nice.
bro.
All right. So,
Oh God,
so,
bro.
so, Ibrahim, one of the interesting things about your book was, man, how people around you reacted to you getting sick too. From you describing it,
Hmm.
some people who were, um, like your close friends, didn't want to bear the weight of having a
Yeah.
friend with illness, and there's other people that got closer to you and wanted to support you. I think that's one of the wildest things, about going through an experience like that is that how everyone around you reacts, and it's not just your health that's deteriorating; it's some relationships that even deteriorate.
Right.
Do
Man,
you,
that's a horrid feeling.
it is a hard feeling in the beginning, but would you want it any other way, Ibrahim? Like that's my question.
No, and I think this is sort of like part of growing up and part of life is like you realize like who your friends are.
Yeah,
Like friends and family and everyone's there for you when times are good. You know,
yeah, yeah.
um, but you really I think find out like I think you really learn to value certain people and certain qualities when times are bad. And it's part of I think like growing up is like learning like how do you discern between all weather friends and fair weather friends, but also at the same time like what I'd offer is like a reflection, right? Like, so I was 23 when I got sick. I'm 27 now, so it's been 4 years. And when it comes to, I think, like thinking about illness, very few people have to confront mortality and like health issues like in this decade of life, right? Like most
Yeah.
people, you start to confront your own mortality, your family's mortality, 30s, 40s, if not even 50s when it comes to yourself. And so if you are never forced to, I think, confront it, right? Um, it's really hard, I think, to when I think about like my friends I lost a lot of friends during my illness, and a big part of the book I think covers the emotional scars that left me, and and so on. But I always had to step back and remind myself that like most people aren't like equipped for this, especially if they're not used to it, especially if they don't have to think about it themselves, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I'd say, and I guess even a question for you, Ali. Like I mean, Ali, you feature in this book. Like you and I have been friends for like at this point now 9 years or so, known each other for like 9 years now. Like, what was your reaction? Like, you and I didn't talk all the time when I was sick. Like we would catch up like every few months. I would see you whenever I was in California. As my friend, like what was it like to find out that like I got sick just personally? Did you think
Yeah.
about it? Did you ignore it? Did you be like every once in a while be like, I should message
No,
him,
of
but I don't
course.
know how to like talk to him because we didn't talk that much during this
Man,
time.
I just, the older I get, I feel like I'm just more sympathetic, and I really care about my friends. And if you're my friend, I care about you. If you're not my friend, I care about you. I care about people suffering everywhere, but especially because you're my friend and I know you, yeah, you're suffering a really, you know, it hurt me. And I definitely thought about you a lot. And definitely, I wanted every opportunity we had when we were together to have a great, great moment. Um, I can't understand how people can be so cold to you, like you describe in your book, or to, others in general. Like we're seeing that nowadays, that people can be so cold and just so brutal to each other and treating each other like lesser than. I don't know. I see my friends, my boys as my family, boys and girls. But that's how I see it. That's how my personal belief and the values that I was raised in. And I think my life is better because of that, because I have good, great, great friends and excellent friends and a brotherhood and sisters too. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And something I'll offer, right? Like so like one of the chapters in the book, I talk about someone named Alex. Alex is a woman, but I like it's a pseudonym and I gave it a gender neutral name because I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to this person. At this point in time, it's been 4 years. Me and this person have like made peace. Like a lot of
Okay.
the
No
people like
comment.
hurt
No
me like
comment.
4 years ago, like we've reconciled, we've made peace and so on. Um but like in the book I talk about how what's it called? And again, Alex is a pseudonym. I just want to clarify
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, I visited this person in California because I was getting really sick, and on my first day in this person's home, like I'm talking to my doctors, I'm sort of like struggling, I'm really fatigued because a few weeks before I was like taking my grad school exam, and in the middle of that grad school exam, like cognitively, like it was like blowing my brain up, like I couldn't like put pen to paper and I had to stop the exam, right? And I had to stay in Chicago over spring break and take the exam again over spring break, and then I had to do it over like 8 hours instead of two, and that like act of sitting an exam, it put me in bed for a week. So I experienced like a physical crash from the intellectual exertion. So I went to California to rest and enjoy the weather and stay with this person. And within the first night, this person says to me, they're like, "You're being a buzzkill because you're talking to your doctors and you're talking about your condition. And I want you to go for yoga with me. I want you to go for a hike with me, but you're too tired to. So I've created like a happy feng shui life in my apartment, and you're kind of killing my vibe, right? Um, right.
Bro, she wanted the fuck.
That sounds
And
pretentious as fuck, to be honest.
oh,
Sorry,
absolutely.
like I'm not.
And
I'm just being honest. But it just
No,
that person sounds pretentious as fuck.
yeah,
hey, no
dude, this like
offense, but
broke,
that
and this
person, when
person was like, "I
Alex
want you to leave."
wanted the fuck, she wanted to make love. She wanted the fuck.
Hey, you don't know if it's a she. I told you. Remember, I told you. I didn't say if it was a she.
Hey, that's great.
It doesn't. It definitely. It sounds like a she. It sounds like a white chick.
No, bro.
Not gonna lie.
Like you don't have to lie to a liar. I'm gonna tell you this.
Feng
I've
shui,
so
bro.
much in my
What
life.
is this?
I
Come
could
on,
tell
bro.
that this person was like, you can kiss my ass saying the pseudonym. First of all, you didn't lose friends. You just never made those people were never your friends. But that person wanted
Yeah.
to fuck.
So, man, maybe you know what? So what happens next is that I end up staying with Ali because like this person kicks me out, and Ali
Yeah.
is being
Man,
such a
fuck
great
her.
friend to me and being so supportive. But now I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, Ali, you fucking cockblock. Like, why'd you
But
rescue
Ali
me
don't
from
want to
that
fuck you.
situation?
Yeah, Ali didn't want to fuck you. That's why.
Ali, you just
Wow.
cockblocked me. This has completely changed this chapter.
No, it's
I
If
was
good.
I was
It's
you, I
good.
would have stayed with
What
Alex.
did
I
you
like
learn
like
that.
from
him a
the
bit.
Ibrahim? What did you learn from the cock blocking though? It's like-
Oh, you trade Alex for Ali, and it's like, you know,
Yeah,
who's got nicer
one had
boobs?
pussy, one had a dick. You know, no offense. I would have stayed with Alex. Fuck Ali. Ali can't get my dick hard. Yeah, he's a great
And Paco
friend. I
can
love him.
say that because he has MS. Paco can
So what? And when you moved in with Ali, what did that teach you? What changed in your life from there?
I don't know if anything changed by living with Ali. I already lived with Ali in college. You know, like I learned that I
Your
learned that
college
some
roommates.
I learned that people after 18, not all of them flush, and that's okay.
Hmm.
That's what I
Yeah,
learned
bro.
living with Ali. You know,
Yeah.
and some things are just are uncoachable. No, but no, very, on a more serious note, other
I
than
bet
it
it
being
is.
serious that he doesn't flush, um, yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
Ali was saying,
We heard the joke,
I've
but it
always
wasn't funny because, we heard the joke. Like, he don't flush. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha. But, like, that's kind of nasty.
oh, I
That's,
know, Paco, you're like coming at me.
like, yo, bro.
Bro, Paco's
I
is
live
like
with,
our the A2 the show's Jeff Ross. He's our roast master, bro.
yeah, like,
he's his head is going in the same direction of the like same shape as well.
Ali is just he's breathing. He's like, oh my
Yeah.
god, oh my
No,
god.
it's amazing, bro. It's amazing. It really like you learn. It was one thing that happened to you, an illness, but then it taught you about life, and so that's the thing. You get wiser through trauma, but it's not something I wish upon anyone. I don't want it. I don't want to be traumatized. I love my life. I don't want to. I don't want trauma, but I guess you get wisdom out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and something I'd say, right? Like, so Ali, when I think about the last 4 years, I've seen you 6 times in the last 4 years, like in California, and every single time I have seen you since I got sick, you and I always have a fantastic time.
That's true.
Like first time, April 2021, when that section of the book was, we went skateboarding at Venice Beach and like did a lot of skating and just like had a lot of fun like on hikes and so on. And we our hangouts are always like
no
very like
comment.
high octane, very fun, very supportive. Um, and what I'd say is that like I in between them, I've always gotten like pretty sick, right? Like I feel like every time we catch up, I'm always like, oh, like my relationship ended, or oh, I got really sick, or oh, like I had this really high or this really low, and we're always catching up. And our time together is always like so much fun and such good energy. And I think that what like illness has taught me is to like really like savor like those moments and to like really like give time to like the people who like bring out that good energy for you, so that like when you have fallen, when you're having a hard time, like you can always like look back at those moments and be just like, oh, okay, like good times will come and good times will go, bad times will come and bad times will go. This is all just part of the currents of life. And so I think that's something that like Ali, like you have really like, what you've not directly taught me, that you're not that wise, but hanging out with you has like reminded me of that.
Wow. All right. I want to thank you, Brahim. Also, you taught me a lot too about other stuff too, like what we're going to talk about right now, COVID. I want to understand more about your understanding, your research. I know you've done a lot of research talking about with people who've experienced COVID, people who've
Mm-hmm.
experienced the vaccine of COVID, the long-term effects of it. What's it looking like?
I would say that, so despite the fact that it's been 4 years since the pandemic, people are still sick from it. You still
Mm-hmm.
have, I think you still have first waivers, people with long COVID, 2020, 2021, 2022, still sick with the virus or still stuck in bed. I think the last estimate that the Bureau for Labor Statistics for the federal agency that like does like employment stuff has pegged that around there's probably like 2 to 5 million Americans who are so sick from like long COVID that they are incapacitated and are either working part time or have left the
Wow.
workforce, right? So even though,
Wow. So around the world, that's millions and millions and millions and millions of people.
yeah, I think like the last estimate that like I looked at for a global incidence of long COVID put it around 300 million people, and this was in
Oh
September 2020.
wow.
Jeez.
You know, so it's like it is this large like and it doesn't discriminate on like age, gender. It's pretty like equally distributed, right? And
Yeah.
when people develop long COVID, there's all these other like associated comorbidities, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and so on, right? We're only now, I think, pharmaceuticals, policymakers, insurance starting to study the prevalence of what COVID-19 did to us, right? So
Yeah.
this is like a big, like ticking time bomb of like a public health issue that's like over time, like as the bulk of the pandemic recedes, we're going to see more of it. So like in the US, probably like 5 million people so sick that they're incapacitated, unable to work, you know? And that incidence, with variants still going around, like it's we have enough herd immunity that like very few people are getting sick with COVID now compared to like a
Mm-hmm.
year ago, years ago. But that doesn't change the fact that like people are still like there is still a probability of people getting sick. That doesn't mean that like we should start going back to like shelter in place, mask orders, and so on. It just means that like we need to recognize as a society that some people aren't going to recover from this, and how do you build policies, how you build therapeutics to support it. So I say that it's still a pretty significant problem that's going to have downstream effects on our health system in the coming decades.
Um, what about people's reaction and government's reaction to COVID? Where do you think they did it the best? Was lockdowns actually beneficial from a health perspective, or was there some other better? Was herd immunity better? Um, yeah.
You know that's really hard, man, because like I sometimes I don't interact with 18-year-olds, but I know some people in this group do.
Mm-hmm.
And like you know, like Ali, like you work with like a lot of like
Oh
kids
yes.
through your. Sorry, the way I phrased it was not the way I was intending it. It's because your
Bro,
professional
no.
job is working with
Look,
kids. You know,
I don't
I
know you.
wasn't
You
laying
don't know
up like
me.
Michael Jackson style.
Yeah, you don't like. No offense. You don't know
I
me. I
know,
don't know
I know.
you. I'm not into kids. Don't get me wrong. Um, I know COVID-19 is not it's not discriminatory. I'm all for the flag and shit, and great. Like, yeah, man, do you, bro? Do you,
Well, I was
man?
Paco, are
talking.
you like
Fuck.
snapping your fingers or like pressing
What
a
is that?
pen? What's that noise that's coming from you?
I
Oh,
think he's
it's
smacking a child in the
no. I
background or
have
something.
what's it called? I have this thing called. So I'm so bored. Like, no
Why are you
offense,
playing
but
with it?
It's
like
scary.
it's hot
You're
as
so
fuck here.
bored
It is so
on the
fucking hot.
podcast, bro.
So I'm like to calm myself down from not sweating. I'm doing this, but
I know,
yeah,
but we're on a podcast, bro. We can
I
hear
know,
every
I know,
time
I
you're
know. I
playing
kind of
around with
noticed. I know. I kind of noticed.
it.
Kind of
and you kept
noticed.
doing it. It's okay.
I'm not gonna do it
Oh
anymore.
my god.
I'm not.
Yeah, so what
You
is
know
it
what?
about?
I'm gonna put it away. Yes. So I'm gonna.
Hands up. Exactly.
Paco. Well,
What is it about
Hey.
kids, dude? What is it about
okay,
kids?
okay. The point
Your
that I was
point
making. So like you know, you have all these like fifth graders who they left fifth grade, and then the pandemic happened, and then they went
Right.
to high school, right? So 3 years of remote
Mm.
learning, or like ninth graders who started remote and then they graduated remote, right? And so you have like so many people like who just if you interact with any like 18-year-olds, like they can't make eye contact, they can't like shake someone's hand, they don't know how to hold a conversation, right? Even for me, like entering the workplace, like I felt I had a few years of work experience where I was like in person, but then like the pandemic happened, and when it came back to like the world, like I sort of struggled like socially, right? And I feel like you see this a lot where mental health, suicide, drug addiction, all these things are high, all-time highs. Opioid use, all-time high. Road rage, all-time high. Like after the pandemic, everyone is kind of like a little off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Like I feel like when I think back to like 2020, like when the pandemic just came out, like I don't think there were any good options, genuinely. Like how do you navigate a pandemic? Like the science says you have to stop the spread, right? Um, I think that this is just what happens when viruses come out. I don't think there was any bad. I don't think there were any good options for what to do with whether to lock down or not. I
Mm-hmm.
think that either of them would have had huge cost to society, and we just got to live with it right now.
None of us are doctors here either on this
Yeah.
podcast. We're not medical professionals. We're not giving advice. We're just us talking about it from our experiences and such. Um,
Exactly.
what
Sharing
about,
thoughts.
yeah, the mandated vaccines? Um,
Yeah,
what are from a public health perspective? Can we talk about that?
yeah. So I'm gonna try to like give a contrarian view on the vaccines, right? Because everyone's heard like the public health perspective, like, oh, like as everyone gets vaccines, it helps protect those who are like most disadvantaged, and it helps create herd immunity. And I get the vaccine, so you who can't get the vaccine can be taken care of. Everyone's heard that point of view, right? So like I don't feel the need to like say that. What
Yeah.
I will say is that there are many people with long COVID, and so there's many people who, after the vaccines, deal with what's called vaccine scarring, where the vaccines have caused them like incredible side effects that are being like neglected. People. The New York Times actually wrote an article about this just 2 weeks ago. It was about like, I think the title is like, these people never recovered from the vaccines. And it was the first time that a major publication sort of talked about the effect that the Moderna, Pfizer vaccines had on their long term health. They're sort of like, amongst those of us who talk about COVID safety still, there's sort of like a wall of silence around criticizing the vaccines, because we're trying to advocate for like public health measures, trying to address like long COVID. But when you criticize the vaccines, you get put into the anti-vax category. And the anti-vaxxers are also the ones who are targeting and attacking long COVID and saying it's not real. So it's very uncomfortable to call question to the vaccines. For me, I lost my ability to walk 3 weeks after I took the Pfizer shot, right?
Oof.
So it's an open question. And so when I was in the ER, doctors were trying to figure out, did I develop Guillain-Barré, right? Which is like a condition that causes like a deterioration of the muscles, right, in the legs. I didn't have Guillain-Barré, but they thought I did because there was a huge cluster of people who developed Guillain-Barré after that vaccine, right? And so when I wrote the book, I think, struggled intellectually with whether I wanted to like label the vaccine as the cause of like what I got, or if I even wanted to acknowledge that it was a possibility, right? Because there is sort of this wall of silence. What I will say is that two things: the vaccines did not, in their control groups, there weren't diverse. There wasn't diverse populations. Like black and brown people weren't included in those clinical trials. And the
Mm.
second is that people with long COVID and post-viral illnesses weren't represented. Now that makes sense because you're in the middle of a pandemic. How do you get
Right.
COVID callers when you're dealing with a pandemic caused by COVID? Whatever, right? Some things you can't really solve for, but they weren't included. And so a lot of people who had long COVID when they got the vaccine, for some of them, the vaccine made them even worse, right? I might consider myself part of that category. And then also like a lot of like African Americans and Latinos, because they weren't part of those studies, like they have comorbidities, they've had a lot of issues, right? So I know so many people, I've heard of so many instances of people developing breast cancer from after the vaccine, people like developing like chronic fatigue syndrome after the vaccine, right? And there's like all this litigation going on right now where like people who got sick like are suing governments for like damages, to be like, the vaccine, you forced us to get it, we're still sick from it. Insurance, healthcare, no one is recognizing and giving us like coverage to treat this condition caused by the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I don't know what would have been like, what is the policymaker's playbook when you're trying to like deal with these things. There's costs and benefits to each thing, right? Like At the end of the
Yeah.
day, today the economy is reopened, the world is back to normal, right? Like we're able to go outside. The world is somewhat normal. Is that the benefit of having universal vaccines? And the cost is that there are some people that got a short end of the stick. You know, I don't know what the right choice would have been on universal mandates, but I do know that today people, I think justifiably so, have experienced vaccine scarring, right?
Man,
And those need to be taken care of. And again, I'll put this: it's not just vaccines that cause this. Like ibuprofen, Tylenol, the flu shot. Every medication has side effects, and every medication that has side effects has some sliver of the population that reacts poorly. And so vaccines are no different. But this was a case where vaccines were
right,
forced on everyone, and so therefore you're going to have a chunk of the population dealing with those effects.
right. One of the thought experiments that we've always known about is the train that's coming is gonna kill 5 people, and you have the lever, and you pull the lever is gonna kill 2 people. Would you pull that lever? I know. What do you guys think about that?
I would let 7 people die.
So more of like for the greater good kind of thing.
We
Yeah, I mean, when I was at the University of Chicago, we would have we had a lot of mayors come to campus who would talk about responding to disasters and hurricanes, and they're like, disaster response, and they're like, okay, we're the leader of the city, and this neighborhood is losing power, and this neighborhood is losing power. We only have 24 hours to save lives. You have to make a call. Either choice you make on where you send your EMS, someone is going to die. But you still have to decide where to send them, because if you don't send them anywhere, more people are going to die. And so it's like, again, like in a crisis situation like the pandemic was, like you either do nothing, which causes more people to lose, or you have to make your choices and accept that some people are. And I remember those mayors when they like talked about that with us in like their leadership seminars. I mean, they didn't run for office again because they were like so traumatized by like what happened from those decisions, and they're like, I had to make those decisions to save like this group of people and not that group of people, and they're like, I will always remember like who I lost, and that's why I think like in these crisis situations, like if you're in a position of authority, like you got to do what you have to do, accepting that
Yeah.
like there are no easy options here.
All
The
right,
whole
here's a
thought process behind this is like this: you can't save everyone, but you gotta save as many people, as many lives as you can. I guess you just have to accept the losses that you do endure, and then keep moving forward and look at least and keep looking at the positives. Because if you save more lives than you lose, then at least that's one good thing that you can say. It's like, okay, at least we did something. At least we were able to do good. That's the whole. I guess I don't want to use the analogy of running a business, but like that's the first thing that pops in my head. It's like there's gonna be losses, and there's gonna be like, I don't want to say profit. And it's like it's a shit. It's a very terrible analogy of like comparing human lives with money, but it's it's kind of what it is. It's in life. There's gonna be these tough decisions that you got to make. I mean, even if you take it to your own self, it's everyone makes their own tough decisions. But when you're in those positions of power, you're kind of making the decision for others, which makes it so traumatic as well for them, because those people don't have a choice in whether they're going to live or not. You're the one who's making that decision for them, and you have to live with that for the rest of your life. But going back to Ali's question about the turning the lever, I think every leader, if put in that position, they would go for saving the lives of the 5 and killing the 2.
I don't know, man, because then you're taking
It's
into you're
it's
like
a
playing
responsibility that
God.
they have
Yeah,
to bear, bro.
exactly. You're
It's
the
a
one
it's a definitely
choosing.
a massive responsibility. Yeah.
Right. I would say the because it's people's lives. You want to be preventative about all these things. You want to be proactive about all these things. So we're not caught in this situation. Now, let's say another pandemic happens again. Now what? Are we more prepared this time around if it happens again than we were last time, or are we going to go through the exact same thing all over again?
I
I
feel
would
like we'd
say,
probably go.
yeah,
No, go
sorry, go
on, go
ahead.
on, Said. Oh, okay. So I feel like we'd probably do the same thing and probably botch it even more. You know, like so here's some sobering facts, right? Like pandemics are only going to become more likely in our lifetimes than less, right? In
Mm,
the Arctic are all these viruses and bugs that were around like thousands of years ago, right? Uh, from the prehistoric era that are like stuck inside the permafrost. And
yeah.
as climate change worsens, right, and global temperatures rise, that permafrost will melt and it'll release these viruses that have not interacted with like our species on this planet in thousands of years, right? And so like that's how superbugs are created, you know, like when viruses mix and like us as hosts have no have no built-in immunity from it, right?
Mm,
So pandemics are only more likely than
And that's
less.
not including the man-made ones, like we're discovering COVID was made in the lab.
yeah.
Open question whether that
Oh,
is true or not, you know. uh,
Uh,
no, that's fair.
did you know? Did
it's,
you guys
To be
know?
honest, you're painting a post-apocalyptic world in my head. With
What,
Did
Paco?
you guys know that the COVID-19 vaccine was not made by Pfizer or Moderna? It was actually made by the U.S. Oh, conspiracy theory, of course, but it was made by the U.S. government and it was distributed. Yeah, I'm dead ass. And it was distributed through Pfizer and Moderna. Booyah.
mm,
Why would they do that though?
Bro,
I
I
don't
have
think that's
no
a
idea.
conspiracy theory.
I don't
The
know.
government gave, I think the government gave pharmaceuticals
It's called
money to.
warp speed.
First of
Yeah,
all, it's first of
I don't
all,
think that's a.
first of all,
That's,
the money, first, it's our money. Did we see any of it? No. Did we see any profit from it?
Right.
No. So in reality is they don't give a shit. They
No.
take free money. They don't. At the end of the day, they're still a Fortune 500 company. They want free money. Give me money. Give me more, more. Yes, yes. You know.
Oh my god.
I want to say my biggest regret is not buying Moderna stock in 2021. Like in
oh yeah.
2021, Moderna stock was $380 and it was like going to the moon. Today it's like 160. Like it's like all that like government money just like shot Moderna up. Like and then when the vaccine came out, like they've kind of gone down. It's like that's my biggest regret is not buying Moderna stock.
No,
Ibrahim,
dude.
don't worry about it. Now you know for next time, if the next pandemic that comes along, you know, the first point you hear about patient zero, invest in Moderna, bro. First thing you do, invest in Moderna. You hear the word patient zero, you're investing in the big pharma. That's it.
You heard it first on this podcast. You know, dabbling into public policy and
Not
trade.
financial advice. Yeah, exactly. No,
Take
that's
Not
the
a
risk, guys.
not
Take the risk.
investors.
Learn from your mistakes.
right. That's the crazy thing about this is that our GDP is financially incentivized and it's all about
Yeah.
stocks and money, but it does have has no inclusion of the general population's mental health, physical health.
Right.
What
Yeah,
kind of
I
world are
don't
we
think they
living
can.
in, bro? If we're just caring about numbers shooting up, but our
First of
lives
all,
are
they
going
don't. They
down.
can't afford. They say, Ali, you're acting like a human being. These are machines that are just happen to be humans. They can't afford to be people. Like people are expensive. Getting sick left and right. All it does is eat healthy. Half the shit that we see is because we don't eat healthy because we love to save money. In reality, is we're not really saving money in the long term. We're actually
Yeah.
costing us more money in the long term. So how are we saving money? We're not saving money. That's it.
To be honest, I just want to take it back a bit to the question about that Ali asked if we'd perform better in the next pandemic. Um, I would disagree with Ibrahim. I don't think we'd botch it. I think we'd actually do better because now that we have the experience in this one, and like a lot of countries did fail miserably, but there's also a lot of countries that did really well. Like you have,
Mm-hmm.
for example,
Lebanon.
New Zealand did really well.
Yeah,
They had
Lebanon.
like probably the least amount of infection rates. Lebanon surprisingly did better than most first world countries. So yeah, like
Yeah, bro.
percentage proportion wise, they actually did
Yeah.
well. So
Half the data's fake,
I
bro.
hopefully these first world countries, like for example, okay, um, but for these first world countries that did mess up, like for example the U.S. that took a long time because they focused more on the capitalism side, the capitalism aspect of the country than taking care of their people of the people. I think they probably learn from it next time. Hopefully, there'll be a better administration in charge to actually look at the mistakes of the previous administration and be like, okay, we should not act this way. You know, we shouldn't focus on the business aspect. We should focus on protecting the people so that the economy doesn't get affected in the long run. Because that's what we saw. That's what happened. You know, the U.S. even had to print a lot of money so that they can pay everyone to stay at their house, which messed up which caused what's it called, inflation. Sorry, what was that,
Wow.
Paco?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Anyway, that's my point. So it's just I just
you
wanted to
know,
say that. Yeah.
I understand the doom and gloom aspect of it. I would like to think that at least us as people, we woke up, we became more aware of our own health in the world and these
Yeah.
systems, and these systems started to get kind of exposed that they don't care about us and our well being; they care about the financial aspect of it. Well, man, what a podcast did they do? We dove deep into this topic. Uh,
Yes, we did.
Saeed, Paco, did you learn anything today?
Uh, COVID-19 is a very detrimental disease, man. I would never recommend it to anybody. And
Seconded.
yeah, so yeah, I mean,
Yes,
yeah,
Saeed?
I agree with Paco, and I think that's a great point to end on, Ali.
I
Guys,
mean
thank
it's
you
the
so much
overall
for watching
subject
us
of
on
it.
A to the show. Um, Ibrahim, would you like to leave our audience with any final words or message?
I think what I would say is that one thing that I've taken away from this entire journey of the last 4 years is I think realizing that you're never sick and you're never healthy, right? You're always oscillating between the two, right? As you go through life,
Yeah,
some days you're more healthy, some days you're more sick, right? And that is just part of life. We're all temporarily able-bodied until we're not, either through age, accident, or so on, and
yeah,
so I think just recognizing that these things are malleable, our health and our bodies, right? I think it means just to give ourselves permission and grace to experience the changes that our bodies and our life will go through, but also using that to give grace and compassion to other people when they're
hmm,
going through challenges, whether that's mental health challenges, physical challenges, disabilities that come that are invisible or visible, and being proactive, about that, whether that's trying to give people accommodations or just giving people support. I think if we can all recognize that we're all temporarily able-bodied, and try to be a bit more compassionate and anticipatory towards that, I think the world will just be like a much nicer and kinder place. And that's what I've taken away from this whole journey is just, let's just be nice.
those are great words,
I
Ibrahim.
mean that is
Thank
the
you for
most
that.
widest thing I
And
ever
guys,
heard.
don't forget to check out Ibrahim's Let me do the outro, bro.
No offense, cuz.
Please.
No,
Uh,
that's some, yo, that's some, like, see, you live in
all right, all
Chicago.
right.
I live in St. Louis. We are in a whole different pole. I don't want the world to be nice. I like the world the way it is, all messed up.
Okay. Paco, focus. Let's get this done. Guys, thank you for watching A to the show. And please check out Ibrahim's new book, Strong Hauler, Learning to Live with Long COVID. You guys know how we end this. Salute to cover the camera and peace.